Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Youth Matters. Now, on today's show, we are discussing mental health and how it impacts a young person, how it impacts a family, how it impacts our community overall, and whether we're doing enough to talk about it and try and solve some of the challenges that we have, and ultimately trying to raise awareness about mental health. Now, before we go any further, we have a caller on the line, so we'll go straight to them. Assalamu alaikum, caller. Assalamu alaikum, caller.
Assalamu alaikum.
How would you like to contribute, brother?
Yeah, brother, I needed some advice if possible. I was around my sister's house one day and I see my niece, she's about 9 years old, and I found her cutting her arm. So I'm just wondering what I can do to stop doing this.
Sure. Okay, brother, thank you for your question. SubhanAllah, Assalamu alaikum, Khalid Bhai, welcome to the show. Now, Khalid Bhai, I'm going to put you on the spot here. It's quite a distressing call, okay, and the manner of which and the topic that the brother has covered. Now, what do you do in that situation if you witness a family member who's cutting them? What do you do? Self-harm obviously falls under self-harm. What do you do in that situation?
Thank you for first of all inviting me, and it's a very important topic you've chosen, which is young people mental health, which as a community we're not comfortable talking about mental health. Sure. So I think we should come out a bit more and talk about it, because no health is without mental health, and government is recognizing that. And as for the caller, it's a difficult one, because this is 9 years old.
Yeah.
Somebody is 9 years old self-harming.
It's really worrying, a primary school student.
Yeah, with 9-year-old, it would be very distressing. And it's for me to advise without knowing the background and things. It's a very difficult one as well.
What would you do immediately? So if you were to walk into a room and you saw a 9-year-old, say one of your family relatives doing that, what would be the initial reaction?
First thing I would need to find out what happened and who's around that person, what's the support network does this person have? Is he got parents then saying, speak to the parents, what's happening here? And there are lots of avenues you can seek help.
Sure,
you've got professional. We live in a country where there's a lot of services, particularly for mental health. If you were in Bangladesh, you don't have those services, resources and luxury of that. So it's very important that you establish what's going on with that child and why this is happening.
Okay. Now, Nazmeen, as a social worker who works with young people, have you come across cases where due to self-harm, students, young people have developed mental health issues? So what do you do in a situation like that? How have you dealt with those cases?
As a caller, that's quite a distressing example. Because she's his niece, so she's very young. What I'd advise him to do straight away is just talk to her. If he's seen that, go up to talk to her. Be quite sympathetic and just, what's going on? Are you okay? What can I do to help you? I think we should go and get some help. And then if you can, just take her to a hospital, because A&E you can get assessed and you can go through services through there and she can access them. Or if she feels like that's too much, she can go to the GP, he can attend with her. Okay. Talk to her. If she feels like, I don't want to tell my mum and dad right now, you have to assess on how comfortable you feel. But if you go against her and then go to her parents when she said not to, you might isolate yourself from helping her further. So I guess, but she's very young, she's 9, so I think the best thing is go and get her to medical help, and then from there they can refer on to other services.
Okay. Now, Adil, is this something that's quite common from, you going to school, colleges? Have you seen signs where people might have self-harmed around you?
Well, obviously people don't really show that they're self-harming, but
have you come across, say, in
I
PE
have
sometimes when, sometimes it's quite, you can see the signs. Have you seen it yourself without mentioning names?
I have seen it myself, indirectly.
Okay.
But it's a really distressing sort of topic, and I think one thing that may cause it is bullying.
It's interesting.
It is quite a widespread issue.
Okay. So, going back to talking about self-harm, and I guess it brings us nicely onto raising much-needed awareness, and you spoke about this. Tell us a bit about World Mental Health Day, which is taking place, and why it's taking place.
Yeah, this is a WHO organized World Health Organization initiative. It's every year, 10th of October, to raise awareness and bridge some of the challenges, really tackle some of the challenges, particularly stigma and taboo within communities around the world. So every single borough has some sort of initiatives, activities to raise awareness. This year, I think the topic they've chosen is psychological first aid.
Okay.
So it's about talking to colleagues, amongst peers, friends, family members.
Sure.
What is mental health?
Okay. Now, Khalid bhai, why do you think people find it so difficult to talk about mental health?
It's not a very easy subject for people to talk about. For example, we as a society are quite judgmental, and this is kind of it's brought down from generation to generation, where there's something socially quite connected, and it's sort of social status and things. And people are easy to go and have a check for diabetes and screening for other, but mental health we don't do enough checks and things. Sometimes we don't.
Are there checks that people can go and do?
Checks, particularly, you need to check yourselves. Is my mental health as well? And is it first, and particularly for young people, it's difficult for them to understand what's going on. And sometimes those first onset of experience quite a bit frightening. They don't understand what's going on with them.
Okay.
So they could find difficult to
Sure.
speak to anybody about it.
Sure.
But also as a family member, friend, it's also your responsibility to look out for your friends and family members.
Sure.
If anything out of character or not in ordinary that you don't see.
Sure, sure. Now, Nazmin, should our young people try and, mental health, I think it's something that can be quite frightening and quite a scary and distressing topic to talk about. Now, should a young person be worried if they're going through, say, a temporary feeling or temporary period where they're not feeling that well? It could be many things.
Yeah.
I guess if someone's unwell, and it might be a short-term kind of challenge that they're having in their personal life, should they be worried that it could be something bigger? Because sometimes, you have the self-fulfilling prophecy where sometimes if it's something small but we make something big of it, and then we start thinking maybe it is, maybe I am that. They almost try and categorize themselves into because I've spoken to some teachers in schools. You have some students who, if they're not being, if they want to get out of studying, and sometimes they're, categorized in a particular statement, they try and fulfill that statement requirement so that then they've got an excuse.
Yeah.
So have you come across that?
I mean, some young people can take advantage of certain situations, like you mentioned with the
Yeah.
teachers. I think it's important that, in terms of mental health, people, if they've got a flu, they go to the doctors, they might get an antibiotic to kind of cure that flu or cold. So I think your mental health is what we need to take it just as seriously. Like, how are you doing that day? How are you feeling? If you're feeling like you can't get out of bed for a whole week, then there's something wrong there. And I think you need to identify with yourself, like, what's going on there. And you just need to talk to people around you. I mean, people do have a self-fulfilling prophecy that they might feel like in that mood because they're going through a life change. I mean, young people these days, they're growing up and they're learning their identity, they're learning their personality. So lots of things are going on.
How long before a person kind of starts thinking, okay, is this something much more bigger, or is it just a phase that I'm going through?
Everyone's different.
Okay,
So
that's quite
some people, it might be like, well, I'm okay, I'm functioning right now, but there's a few things that are going on. Some people are like, well, the whole world is over and it feels complete. So everyone is different. But if you do feel like you're not well, I mean, go to the closest person next to you. It could be a friend, it could be a family member, it could be a professional from school or college, but go and ask for help, saying that, do you know what, I feel a bit odd today and I don't know why, this is what's going on. And just have that conversation, but you need to be open and have that conversation.
Okay, now...
Can I just come into that conversation? It's very interesting. It's functionality is the key here. I think we all have bad days. Don't feel like going to work, you're just going to lie down all day, which is fine. But this is some things that's continuously affecting your day-to-day activities. And working life is affecting working life, relationship and things like that.
Yes.
Then you need to be worried about it and need to have that check.
Okay, that's really interesting. Thank you. Now, Adil, just putting you on the spot. Have you experienced that, where there might have been a week where you didn't feel so well, or for whatever reason, but it was just a temporary kind of sensation that you went through, and it didn't become anything bigger? But so have you experienced that in your personal life?
Yeah, I have experienced this sort of thing. It happens I think in everyone's life. People go through these blips, and there's just, when something happens, when something bad happens to a person, it tends to affect their mood and affect how they sort of function.
Sure.
And it has happened to me, but it hasn't been long term.
Okay.
Can I just say, what you've just said, I don't think many young people are confident of saying this because of the taboo and stigma that we have. Because I've come across young people, particularly that I've worked with directly, they had a very good friends circle. Once they disclosed that, they gradually deteriorated. They lost their contact with the friends because they don't want to associate somebody who has got mental health problem. They tend to define that person with as a mental health person who is mentally ill rather than person who has mental health.
Sure. Now, Nazmin, Khulibai touches upon something really important there, where sometimes we don't want to admit it because we don't want to be marginalised amongst our friendship circles and stuff like that. Do you come across that?
Definitely. I think it's not just that friendship circle, it's that family as well, because a lot of people don't know how to react to it. I mean, the caller just said, well, I saw my niece doing that, what do I do? Because it's not a subject that people talk about a lot and which really needs to be spoken about. I mean, there's a lot of spotlight in terms of, for example, if somebody's got cancer, there's a lot of conversation about what your symptoms to look out for and how to access help. But in mental health, there's not a lot of awareness as much as there should be. And we're trying. So definitely there's a difficulty of young people coming forward and asking for help because they don't want to be marginalised, they don't want to be isolated, they don't want to be seen as different. I mean, and they're not different. Everyone goes through mental health in their life. I mean, I have a friend who's a psychotherapist. Everyone will experience a mental health episode. It's just inevitable. You go through life experience, you do that. It's just about how you come through that and what you do to come through it.
Sure. Now, Adil, do you hear about a lot of young people who were trying to see if there's a link between unemployment and mental health. Have you seen young people who, sometimes they're trying to get a job and they find it hard, and then weeks go by, months go by, and they're still not employed, maybe years go by. Have you seen anyone who's actually become quite depressed because they can't access work?
I haven't actually seen anyone.
Do you know anyone, or have you heard?
But I have heard of people that it's just something that there's not much to do about it. It's just
because it does affect your confidence, doesn't it?
It does affect a person's confidence and well-being, being unemployed for however long it is. And it is quite difficult nowadays, the pressures to get a job and earn a living.
Yeah.
And it's not helped by with the fact that the unemployment is rising, and
especially amongst young people as well. So someone like yourself, for example, you're studying at the moment. Are you, at the back of your head, are you concerned that once I go through, we study for a significant amount of time, and then after all of that, what if I don't get a job? Does that keep you awake at night, or you're okay? Do you think about that?
Yeah, I do think about that a lot. It's just something that, you're never sure about what's going to happen after 5 years or however long it is. Worried about what sort of job you're going to get at the end of a degree or, wherever it is. It's
because
just
you have a lot of young people, don't they, who say now, I don't want to study because, there aren't any jobs. But you're someone who's studying, and how would you react to someone who says that? Would you say that that's the wrong attitude to have?
I think it is the wrong attitude. Like, you can never get anything without trying. So yeah, by all means you should try your best, and if it doesn't work out, then there's other things to do.
Okay, no, thank you for that. Khulibai, in terms of disability, and if we try and link it to mental health, you hear many, research shows that there are a lot of people who have a particular disability, and that can actually be the cause of depression or other mental health issues. Have you come across that in your work?
So what do you mean?
Say, for example, someone who is deaf. Okay, the fact that they're almost marginalised, they can't interact, they have many barriers. Could that be a cause for them getting quite depressed?
Not necessarily that if you've got physical disability can actually cause. I haven't come across any research or any paper study that shows this. But there are environmental factors, your upbringing. There are different models. I mean, medical models primarily would say there is a genetic cause to that.
I'm just thinking, if I'm someone who has, a deafness, if I'm deaf, and I see people around me, and maybe my family can't use sign language to communicate with me, that could cause a person stress, mental illness,
yes,
mental challenges.
Cause definitely stress and challenges, but not necessarily cause an illness.
Okay.
Not necessarily
a mental problem. Could that not cause? Because remember, with someone who's deaf, it's over a significant period of time. It's not like something like we've spoken about over a week. Could that be a slow build-up?
I haven't come across anything that actually proves that could be the cause. But as
Like,
I
can you
said,
see
this-
where I'm coming from in
Yes,
terms of, you
yeah.
know, if
but
I'm,
there are like dual diagnoses, for example, somebody, you know, who is using drugs, for example, substance, and that can cause, or sometimes they said somebody who's got mental illness use substance. So, I mean, there are learning disability and mental illness, so it's dual diagnosis. Somebody who's got mental illness can have learning disability as well, but not necessarily the learning disability causing somebody to become mentally unwell.
okay, that's quite so. So according to you, someone who has learning difficulties, a young person who's watching this who might have learning difficulties, there's no common cases where that leads to them having a mental problem later on.
Sometimes it's very difficult to identify which one's what,
Okay.
and sometimes often these people struggle, particularly dual diagnoses.
Okay.
Which service should pick them up?
Okay.
Sometimes they'll say no, it's
So
not
when,
mental
just for the
health, it's
benefit of our audience at home, when we talk about dual diagnosis, is this where more than one
more than
organis-
one condition.
Okay,
yes,
more than one condition.
yes.
Okay, that's fine. Now, Nazmin, do you get people who, you know, who come to you and because of, say, pressures from school, college, it impacts the way they behave, and maybe, you know, mentally it puts a lot of pressure on them? Do you get a lot of cases like that? Because we've got a lot of young people watching this show, and they might actually be, you know, quite mentally strained because of the pressures. Do
I
you
think
feel there's-
Adil's mentioned a lot about pressures and the young people, the pressures they go through in terms of trying to do well and make sure they get good grades in their college, and you know, their attainment level has to be very, very high, and that pressure on themselves, and sometimes some young people might experience bullying as well. There's so many pressures for our young people these days in terms of society, what they expect from them, from young women to young men as well, what you're expected to do, how you're expected to act. Everything's judged, you know, it is a judgmental society. So there is a lot of pressure our young people go through, and at the same time you have to remember they're growing up as well, they're learning who they are. So all this is kind of just pressure is building up, and sometimes it could release into a manifestation of self-harm, or it could be a very low mood that could turn into depression. But it's about them to seek help when they feel like they're not themselves, when they feel like something's not right.
And what would you say,
Talk
you know,
to
someone
somebody.
who's going through, you know, going through those experiences, what would your advice be in terms
My
of support?
first advice is honestly go to somebody you feel like you can trust, and you feel like they can help you. So it could be a friend, it doesn't have to be
And
your parent.
What about for a parent who, you know, who identifies that their child might be going through some mental challenges? What would you say to
I think the
parents
first
watching?
step is honestly don't complicate it so much. Just go and have a conversation with your children. You know, ask them, are you okay? What's wrong? I mean, don't pressure them. If you're like, well, tell me what's wrong, and get angry and irritable. If they're not ready to tell you, they're not ready to tell you. But seek advice. I mean, go to their own GPs, go to the schools and so on. I would say, I'm really worried about my child. Have you noticed anything different? What can we do to support them?
But the
You know,
first step would be
Yeah.
for them to speak to their
just
child.
talk to them.
Okay,
Yeah.
brilliant. Thank you. Now, that's the end of the second segment. In the third segment, we're going to focus on solutions and also, you know, preventative measures that can be taken to ensure and safeguard our children from mental health problems. So please do stay with us.